I think it was about this time last year that I decided to take a plunge into the world of arcade gaming, and I bought myself a NEO GEO. This came from Aliexpress along with a mini supergun and the multi 161 in one cart. There's no way I'm paying the prices that the original carts demand. I just wanted to play a couple of arcade games. And all was going really well, just up until before Christmas there, playing a game with a few friends, decided to reset this thing to put on something different, and it threw up this error. I have been a little preoccupied over the last couple of months, what with all the Amiga stuff that's been going on here on the channel, but I have been missing my fix of arcade games, so let's see if we can fix it. There's the JAMA Mini Supergun that I bought, just in case anyone is interested. This one uses Sega Saturn pads. The only reason I went for this one in the first place is that I have two such Sega Saturn pads. I don't have any NEO GEO pads. Although saying that, it does use Sega Saturn pads, but it does require a NEO GEO CD SCART cable. Let's put this out of the way though, and let's see if we can figure out why this doesn't work. Now, it doesn't usually sit on the desk like this. There are normally standoffs on it, these things, but I've already removed them because I've already had a look in here. This was the first time I ever had the cover off, and it seems as if our NEO GEO here has had a little bit of rework in the past. So the first thing that jumps out then is that one of the NEO buff chips has been replaced with this thing. This just seems to be bridging several of the pins around this. There's what the NEO buff chips originally looked like. In this location here though, the NEO buff, or buffer as the name would suggest, well, this is acting as two HC245s, and in this location here it can be bypassed, which is what this little thing is doing. And thank you very much to Gadget UK for explaining that to me. While we're here, you can notice that this component here beside where that NEO buff has been replaced, well, that side of it anyway, that has definitely been reworked. There's a bit of crusty looking flux stuck to it. And then down in this location, in the backup area, this RAM chip here, well, I'm pretty sure it has been reworked because equally there's a bit of crusty looking flux around it. Although I'm not blaming any of that rework for our calendar error. Rather, in this location here, can you spot anything missing? This crystal was originally in here, although when I first opened this thing up, I noticed that one leg of it had snapped off. How that ever happened, I have no idea. Although it obviously has either got a knock in the past or has been weakened by something anyway, because as soon as I touched it, the other leg, it broke free as well. The clock crystal here, in combination with that chip below it, an NEC D4990A, that is the real-time clock chip itself. And if there is an error in that, or a problem with the crystal, we should get, or we will get, that calendar error on the screen. So is it just that simple? Does this simply need to be reattached? Let's start with that. Stick this back on and see if that solves the problem. So I put some fresh solder onto those points there where this was attached originally. Let's see if I can get it reattached. Right, that seems to be it. Could it be that simple? Well, no. And you knew it wasn't going to be that simple because this video is more than 2 minutes long. So I want to take a quick look at the real-time clock chip here using the scope. Pins 14 and 15 from this are running to and from our crystal. We should be able to read the clock frequency of that on pin 14, and there it is. Although I do think the probe of the scope is screwing that up ever so slightly. The frequency counter there is jumping about all over the place. Although if I take that off the pin and then put it back on, you will get a tighter frequency read from this just initially. Yeah, you can see it's sort of 32 point odd there, and then as the signal dies out, it's dancing all over the place. So it reads it initially as 32.79, which yes is slightly off from our 32.768, although I would put that discrepancy down to the inaccuracy in this scope. I think our crystal is working fine. Moving down this side of the chip then, pin 13 is not connected. Pin 12 is output enable. That should just be held high, which it is. Pin 11 is TP, timing pulse output. We can test that up here actually. Test point for it. And there is something pulsing there. And we have a pretty steady 32 Hertz clock. That is kind of slow, but a 32 Hertz clock nonetheless. Next pin along, pin 10, that is the data output. And we have a 1 Hertz clock, or just over 1 Hertz, 1.01. Pin 9 is a clock input. And it's dead as a doornail. I'm not getting anything out of those pins on the bottom side of this chip, or for that matter, that clock pin up there. But I've switched out to the logic probe, as you can see, partly because I really dislike that scope. That's something I have to get myself a decent oscilloscope. But I think what's happening here is that the system is only running for a split second, then it hits that calendar error and it stops. And with this, we can sort of see that. If I go on to say pin 7, which is a data input, you see it pulses once there and then it'll just stay low. But that's about the time it takes for the system to start up and throw that calendar error. Pins 1, 2 and 3 on this, C2, C1 and C0. The three of those are more or less always high. And with those three high like that, if we look at the datasheet for the chip again, well, that has the chip in a serial command transfer mode. And I'm wondering, as according to this bottom table here, with 0, 1 and 2 high, is it in a test mode? Because if we scroll on down to this table here, that would seem to suggest to me that it's getting stuck or it's reading a time read, because our data output clock was at 1 Hertz. Our TP, that was at 32 Hertz, and that is part of the test mode. Now, I could be reading that datasheet wrong, of course, but it does make me wonder, is there even anything wrong with this? So it's not the crystal. I'm not yet convinced that the real-time clock chip itself, that is faulty, but I checked the 5V rail levels around here, and where do you see this? So there's a ground point there. 5V on the real-time clock chip is top left, looking at it, pin 16, and it's only 4.3 volts, which seems kind of low. Equally, if we check the bit of 7.4 logic sitting beside it, that's only 4.3. If we try these two RAM chips, 4.3 and 4.3. That's everything within that backup area. If we move outside of that though, there's a bit of logic there. 5.05. Another one there. 5.05. Even those other two RAM chips that are sitting directly beside these. 5.05 and 5.05. So something within this area is pulling the 5V rail down. Well, that sent me down a complete rabbit hole. You can see I've removed the battery. This was dead anyway, wasn't holding the charge. There was only about 0.3 of a volt in it. So I thought maybe there was something funny with the battery. Maybe it had partly shorted or something, pulling 5V rail down. Let's remove that. Didn't make any difference. Then proceeded to remove that pad that used to be under here, protecting all these components. Now I did find some corrosion down in here, so reflowed all of this and it didn't make any difference. Also tested those two transistors, nothing wrong with those. So why is the 5V rail in this area sitting at 4.3 volts but 5.05 everywhere else? Well, that's just the way it's meant to be. Within this area, within the backup area, it's not the same 5V rail as out here. Rather, within this area, it is battery VCC, as it's called on the schematics. And the intention being that the battery that should be in here, well, when you power the system off, it keeps these components live to retain any saved high score information, for example, within these two RAM chips. But that doesn't really help us with our current problem, does it? We've still got the calendar error. And so why do we have that? Well, I was pointed towards this website, the NEO GEO development wiki, and the calendar error. So the cause of this is that the real-time clock's time pulse is too slow or too fast. It should be no less than 57 frames and no more than 64. Can happen if traces are cut. Now it does give us some suggestions. First one being check the 32,768 Hz crystal. This thing. Well, we have checked that and we know we are getting the correct clock. That is meant to be a 32.768 kilohertz part. Interestingly though, on the Silk screen here, it says 32.768 megahertz, but that is incorrect. It is meant to be kilohertz. It then suggests we should check the traces around the 4990, the clock chip, in particular pin 11 or TP. Well, we know that's good. That's that point there that we tested earlier. And it wants us to check connectivity from pins 5, 6 and 7. There are traces running from pins 5, 6 and 7 across to this chip here, the NEO F0, and I have checked all three of those using the multimeter and continuity, and they are fine. The reason that it's telling us to check traces is because some options of this board had a barrel battery here rather than the lithium type battery that we have, and as we well and truly know, those old barrel batteries, well, they like to leak, causing corrosion and issues with traces. There are no such problems on this board though. Wants us to check the 74HC32, that is that component beside it, and its corresponding traces running through to the real-time clock chip. Well, the HC32, that is an OR gate, and if for example we were to take pins 8, 9 and 10, well, pin 8 is an output, currently high. Pin 9 and 10 are inputs, so 9 is high, 10 is low. The combination of high and low does indeed give us the high output. I have tested right around that chip, it is working fine. Equally, all the traces running from there back to our real-time clock chip, those are also fine. It then wants us to try a reset of the backup RAM content. Why it wouldn't suggest doing that first is beyond me, but anyway, that reset is done by either removing the battery, which I have already done, or we can flip all 8 of these switches to on and then power on the board. That does put our board into a test mode, although very basic. It's just testing the work RAM. But if we power cycle, turn all those off again, and turn the power on, well, the calendar error, it persists. So the other suggestion that it has, you can use Unibios to skip this error. And to be honest with you, it's starting to look like that's going to be our only option, because I can't really find anything wrong in here. I suspect the error itself is within the real-time clock chip, because everything else seems to test okay. So about the only option I have left is to try Unibios. We need to take that BIOS chip out. Unfortunately on my board here, it's not in a socket, so we'll need the desoldering station to remove that. But we'll pull that out, fit a socket in its place, program up Unibios, and that should let us get beyond that problem. It may also give us some more information as to what the actual cause of the problem is. Unfortunately, if it is a failure in the real-time clock chip, well, the only place you're going to get another one of those is on another one of these boards. Although, in all honesty, the intention of this real-time clock chip in here, it's for the bookkeeping features of this console. Remember, this is a bit of arcade hardware, so the operator of the arcade would have needed that bookkeeping information to know how often the game's been used, how much money the game is making. I have no use for that feature, so if we can simply bypass it, well, that's enough. Let's get this removed. I'm just going to flow a little bit of fresh solder onto all these points first of all. This will be a multi-layer board, probably 4 layers at least, so I can see it absorbing quite a bit of heat. I do have the desoldering station here up at 400 degrees. So there are a few of those there that didn't really seem to let go. I'm going to try and flow a bit of the solder into it instead, and then desolder again. This is a leaded solder. This one has a lower melting point than that unleaded stuff I was using. Hopefully a bit of this mixed with whatever is on here originally might just lower the melting temperature of all of it and allow my desoldering station to clear those holes a bit easier. Well, I think that's it free. Yep, certainly seems to be. One old chip removed. Now, it's a 40 pin dip. I don't have any new 40 pin sockets, but what I do have is one scrap a 500 plus motherboard. It has a couple of 40 pin sockets on it that we could take. Let's take this one here, shall we, and stick it on there. So that'll go on there. Paying attention, of course, to which end the notch is at. This left side. And you know me, I had to get a bit of Amiga into this video somewhere. We now have an Amiga socket on our SNK NEO GEO. So I'll just quickly do opposite corners, and then pushing the socket from the other side, I'll remelt those points, just to make sure that it is indeed sitting flush against the board. That seems pretty good, so I'll just get all the rest of this done. All done, although I have noticed that the tip on the end of that desoldering station, it has scratched the solder mask here on a few of those traces. Maybe it's time for a new tip, or maybe I just need to be a bit more careful. So I'll have to go over that with a bit of nail polish or something just to protect those again where the copper has been exposed. But I can do that later. Before we do anything else though, Let's stick our original ROM chip back in here, just to make sure that it still works, or well, it still throws the calendar error. Not that putting a socket in there is magically going to fix it, but I just want to make sure that everything looks the same. And yeah, still works, or works as much as it did 5 minutes ago. So let's write Unibios. So we need a new EEPROM. That's in here, and I have to say a big thank you to Lee Smith from his workshop. He very kindly sent me a 27C 1024. That is the EEPROM that we need for the NEO GEO. And yes, you might have guessed it, there is a bit of a community between all us retro tech YouTubers. We all hang out in a super secret Discord that I'm not allowed to tell you about, but we all try to help each other, sending each other bits and pieces as needed. I said I needed one of these relatively quickly, and Lee came to the rescue. So we'll stick it into the TL866 and let's get it programmed. So as I said, our chip is a 27C 1024 DIP 40. And let's just see if there's anything on that chip that Lee sent us. He said there might actually be a NEO GEO ROM on that already. So device read. In fact, our actual part number is that one there. It's the NEC chip. I was trying to read the device ID for an AMD chip. Hopefully that's why it threw the error message at us. Let's try that again. And yeah, that works fine. So no, that is one blank chip. Oh no, it's not blank, is it? There is some data written here. So I will have to wipe it. So we need this thing, the UV light EEPROM eraser. I really don't like using this. Not only because it has a warning label here, large dose of ultraviolet radiation is harmful to human health, but more so when I first got this thing, I decided to take it apart and have a nosy inside. Let's just say it's very cheaply put together, and I am waiting for this to one day burn my house down. So the UV light has finally started. We'll leave that going in there for a few minutes anyway, because we need to go and download the Unibios ROM itself. So it's very straightforward. This is the website. We're just going to go to download, and we are downloading version 4 for the MVS, and that is it. That is our ROM file. Right, it's been about 5 minutes, no fires this time. Although I could swear every time I use this, I get a weird taste in my mouth. I'm sure that's just a coincidence though. So let's see if it is blank now. So device read. Yeah, looks better this time. Let's just confirm that. Blank check. And yes, it is. So let's load that ROM that we downloaded. Device and program. Well, one quick update of the software later, and one quick tweaking of the settings, and it has programmed fine. It was this here, VDD write. That was set to 6.5 volts automatically when I picked that chip, but that needs to be set to 5 volt, and changing it to 5, well, it seemed to program okay. We can verify it, and verify succeeded. So let's get it installed in our wee console here and see if that finally lets us get past the calendar error. And yes, if this does work, I will cover the window on it, but it'll be fine for now for a few minutes anyway. We're going to need joypad plugged in, and let's see if this works. Well, it came up showing us a cross-hatch test. How do we use Unibios? I know it does have some test features built into it, but how do we access them? Pressing start on this, which is the start button from the NEO GEO. That seems to cycle through options here. Yes, I could always read the manual, but where's the fun in that? So yeah, I know all that works. That's one problem actually with this Sega Saturn supergun, because you get buttons A, B and C, okay, and despite the fact this is a 6-button pad, well, the buttons on this, X, Y and Z, those are just A, B and C again, but a rapid fire. That shoulder button, that is the coin insert. That shoulder button does nothing, so we're missing button D. I really wish they had it mapped, you know, A, B, C and D, or A, B, C and D. I'll give you an option to map button D to somewhere else. Even that shoulder button would have done, because for any games that do require the 4 buttons, well, the only way to access the additional button from this is these 2 breakout points here, which is totally pointless if you're asking me. But anyway, on with the test. Hey, there's a sound test built into this. Well, that's working fine. I don't have a memory card. We don't really need to reset the backup RAM because there's no battery in here retaining any information within that backup RAM. There is our calendar. Should we try and enter something in here? Although when we power cycle this, it's just going to lose it, isn't it? Because there's no battery. But let's just try something anyway. Oh, I need to press D to set it, and I can't press D. Ugh, forget about it. Then that just takes us back to the cross-hatch test. So yeah, it seems to be working okay. Let's put the game in and see if it boots. Just putting that cover back on because it helps to carry the cartridge. And yes, when I bought this from Aliexpress, it says China only sale GG. I thought in the pictures it was like a pen mark or a chalk mark onto it. It actually looks like it's been burnt into it. So at some point in the future, I do need to try and come up with a better case for this. I do have a 3D printer, so there's bound to be something out there that we could print. Put this into like a consoleized case. But let's just see if it's going to work. And yeah, it has booted up fine. Now, the strange thing here is that I was expecting this to still throw the calendar error, and then we would have to push a button to bypass it. But that's not the case. It hasn't given us that error. So is that right? When you put Unibios in, it just totally ignores any problem with the calendar side of things? Because it seems to be working fine, doesn't it? I can finally play some arcade games again. I've been missing this.
Thank you. Laser gun. Laser gun.
Right, anyway, I'll be here for hours if I don't turn it off. So, as I said, I am a little bit confused here because I was expecting that calendar error to still be present. Yeah. Calendar error. No. Calendar error. Although, look at that. Back on Unibios, we went round to the calendar settings, and that is just garbage there, isn't it? Under the current time and date displayed. Wonder if we reset the backup RAM, then yeah, okay, this time it has cleared that garbage out of what was stored in there. I wonder how you hook up button 4 input. So to get my button 4 or button D input, all I need to do is ground out that first pin there on this connector. There are 2 ground points there on the supergun. And so if I take a little bit of wire here, well, this is actually a 10k resistor, or sorry, a 10 ohm resistor. If I take that and ground that out, that should in theory set the time and date which I have entered. And no, it seems to have corrupted everything again. So perhaps that does in itself confirm that we have a problem with the calendar system on this board. Well, we know we do, but the fact that that's just throwing up corruption has that once again confirmed it. I do think the problem is this chip, and as I say, the only place you get another one of those is on another one of these boards. But we've proven that with Unibios here, we don't really need to worry about it. Well, I think we'll just end the video on that. We weren't really able to fix the problem, were we? We have just sort of worked around it with Unibios. But at least it does get my NEO GEO up and running again, and I can finally get back to some arcade action. This is one of my favourite arcade games, by the way. Neo Turf Masters. Yes, it is a golf game, but it is a fantastic arcade style golf game. If you haven't played it, I would highly recommend it. In terms of the actual problem on this board then, well, I can't say for absolute certainty, but I'm 99% sure that it is that real-time clock chip which has died. So as I said, the only place you're getting another one of those is on another NEO GEO, or at least I can't find any other source of them anywhere else. If anyone has a scrap board and has that chip on it, if you can remove it, well, I'd maybe take it off you to try on this board to see if it would fix the problem. Although with Unibios in there, the real-time clock chip, as I said, is more or less surplus to requirements. Certainly surplus to my requirements. I have no need for it, so why worry? So yeah, we didn't really fix anything in this video, did we? But hopefully you enjoyed it nonetheless. Sometimes it's just about the journey, isn't it? And getting this thing running again, well, it certainly took us for a bit of a ride. But that is it for now. So hopefully you did enjoy the video, and if you did, I would appreciate a big thumbs up. Why not hit subscribe if you haven't done so already? Still plenty more yet to come here on CRG, and I'll see you next time.